Okay, so I'm going to count down the first episode of The Vow on HBO. I realized that if we were going to do a documentary, we probably should have paired it with the first episode of I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which is the HBO documentary about the Golden State Killer, based on Michelle McNamara's book. Apparently, it's very good.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so maybe for another time. But The Vow is the Nexium cult, and there's a big HBO docuseries out about that, and I think there's 4 of them out right now. We watched the pilot, and so I guess I'll recap that if you want to count me down.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you're going to start in 3, 2, 1, go.
We mostly hear the perspective of like 2 or 3 expatriated members of the famous Nexium cult, people explaining exactly how they initially got roped into this organization. It's basically kind of like fronting itself as a sort of multi-level marketing ideological conference. Like this is how you can like change your brain to be more successful. And the episode sort of leads up to where they ultimately have grown into, my time's up. They've grown such that they're able to get influence from like some really powerful people, and not just tangential members of Hollywood, but the freaking Dalai Lama kind of gives his seal of approval to Nexium, and the heiresses of the Seagrams Corporation, and like all these like really famous people are tangentially connected to this creepy organization. And at the center of it is Keith Raniere, who they call him Vanguard. He's basically treated like the centric god that exists in any essential cult, and everybody talks about him like he's this perfect like monolithic genius, and really he's just like a weird squirrely neckbeardy creep who has a smooth tongue. And I mean, there's not a lot of story in it because they're really trying to pace it out. In fact, we don't even really get to see here in this pilot episode too much of their insidious realness in Nexium. We just kind of get the sense that something's off, and obviously we know that they're about to become like racketeering, sex trafficking cult, but like we don't see any of that in the pilot episode. It's really just about these like fragile egos who find belonging in this multi-level kind of organization about belonging or whatever. It reminded me a lot. Do you remember the episode of Boy Meets World where Sean joins a cult?
Not especially, but I know it to be a thing.
So it's like mid-series Boy Meets World, Sean is really like struggling with his identity. He really doesn't feel like he fits in anywhere, and he joins a cult, and everybody's like, and he basically wants to denounce everything else in his life. And it's the episode where Mr. Turner gets in a motorcycle accident and he effectively dies in the series.
He dies.
Yeah. And he doesn't die because he comes back in Girl Meets World. They kind of like overwrite that, but they like effectively he Disney Channel dies in that episode, and it's really the only thing.
Full body cast. And they like hold his hand.
But that's the only thing that can lift Sean out from the trance of this cult, is like seeing that like people love him because he feels like he's not loved. It feels very much like that. It's just this like creepy kind of like underground society where they pretend that you have like a voice because the world outside is judgmental, and it felt very much like that, but in like a very real way. Dude, cults are terrifying.
Totally. I liked how they introduced this episode as like so far it seems like kind of okay. Like it really introduces it the way that the people must have felt it.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, no, it just seems like a way to like better yourself. And then, the more you watch the episodes, the closer you get. Did you watch any more than one episode?
No, I think I will watch some more, but not by myself. Like it was kind of upsetting to watch it by myself.
Yeah, it's it hits all the cult beats for sure.
Right. Yeah, but I don't know a lot about. Like I never watched. Did you watch Going Clear, the Scientology documentary?
No, I didn't actually. But yeah, I feel like I kind of know all the parts there too. It's basically like, can we drain your money? And then like, is there going to be a guy at one point who's like, and also I'm going to be the guy who has sex with all these women.
Right.
And like, no one else can have sex with the women.
That for sure seems to have, that seems to be like a standard beat, like you said, of all of these organizations. And I think the main reason the Nexium one has gotten so much attention publicly is that like Allison Mack from Smallville was like I think at a time like number 2 or maybe number 3 at Nexium. She was like at the height of their power. Like she has also been indicted on sex trafficking. Like she is a high up in the organization at their most powerful, and she just kind of slips in towards the end of this first episode, and she seems very charming. But interestingly, so leading up to it, there's one other actress who's featured pretty prominently, and her name is Bonnie, and she's the one who's married to this main guy. And so it's so interesting because Ross and I on the Star Wars podcast have talked a lot about this upcoming Kenobi, Ewan McGregor Star Wars series on Disney Plus. And so we've talked a lot about how very plausibly at this point in the timeline, Obi-Wan is isolating on Tatooine, and Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru are somewhere in the distance raising a young Luke Skywalker, right? And if we are to reuse the cast that's very briefly used in Star Wars episodes 2 and 3, Joel Edgerton can very plausibly come back and play Owen Lars in the Kenobi series. And do they recast this nobody actress who played Aunt Beru, who it turns out was at a time very involved in Nexium and is very heavily featured in this first episode of the show, but she has denounced it, and she and her husband, who's like kind of the main talking head of this first episode, they're apparently two of the cult's most outspoken detractors since they've left. Like they really saw, they got some perspective, and they've really gotten away from it, so that's good. Yeah, I don't see
episode 2.
I don't see her coming back.
Oh, in the show?
I just don't see her coming back to Star Wars, is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't think so.
No.
Although I think she's like down with that world. I'm sure she would love to come back. Like if she got the offer, I think she would.
Well, yeah, she was just like a struggling artistic person. It seems like her creative outlet of choice was probably music. Like she was trying to like be a singer-songwriter, but she also had some small acting parts. Anyway, seems like a lovely person, but it's very upsetting because like it seems like also her marriage got pretty fucked up for a while too.
Yes, possibly permanently, but I'm not sure.
Was she also hooking up with Keith? Probably, right?
No, I don't think she was, but I think she was like one of the first people to be like, there's something wrong here. Like girls are, or like some of the women are like apparently being like coerced to, essentially the second episode. If I can I spoil it?
Yeah, go ahead. Of course. Sure.
So the second episode, you learn that there's like women that go to other women and they were like, hey, there's like this other kind of like society that's happening and you can learn about it, but like you need to give us some like collateral, essentially, like something that like you would never want anyone to like know. Like you basically need to give up like your deepest secret in order for us to like tell you.
Right.
And if you do that, then you can like learn. And it's basically like, oh, this is like the sex cult for
that's sex
like, you can have sex with the leader. And
it's so upsetting.
It gets crazy.
Well, I think at some point, and this is surely going to turn up in the documentary at some point, but at some point, Allison Mack, she becomes like chief confidant to Keith, the leader, because like I know I've seen leaked emails of her contacting like other supremely famous women, like way more famous than her, like Emma Watson famous, of like basically Keith Rainier's like celebrity crushes, and she's like, it's her job to try and get them to come have sex with him, which is so creepy.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And meanwhile he's like managing like he's got all of these women on like calorie counts.
Yeah,
they're all like unhealthily skinny.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
You know what though, they briefly mentioned Tony Robbins, and a lot of this first episode does kind of feel a little bit like that. Like get everybody in a conference room and everybody's chanting this like encouraging stuff, and we'll put a sash on you because it means that you've leveled up to, you know, champion from victor or something, whatever. I forget what the buzzwords were, but like I always kind of felt a little eerie about the Tony Robbins stuff, and I know maybe he has had some sketchy stuff come out about him. I really don't. I haven't looked into him, but like just the idea of these like motivational speakers who make $1 billion telling you that you're enough. There's something pretty skeevy about that and culty, whether they're actually like racketeering and human trafficking or not.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. The Tony Robbins stuff. If you watch that documentary, "I'm Not Your Guru," it also is like strange.
Yeah,
it's not equally as strange, obviously, but it's like there's some weird stuff there. Like they're making such a huge business off of. Like, I don't know, maybe they are building people up in the right way. He's such a like straight shooter too that I like, kind of like it, but obviously he's got culty stuff kind of peppered around him.
What about when they allegedly cure Tourette's syndrome?
Yeah, I'm so curious to find out. Like in episode 5, are we going to be like, okay, that was like a plant, or this guy was on like...
Maybe it's a plant. So there's this guy who like has really bad Tourette's, and they position it like, look, if we can cure this guy's Tourette's without medicine, just with our like our documentation and our philosophies, then we'll garner a little bit of credibility with like science, with big science. Right. And it kind of works, at least as it's depicted in the pilot episode. This guy has seemed to completely be cured of his Tourette's, which, I mean, obviously there's something shady about that.
Yeah, do you think that like he was actually on like a certain drug or something? And I'm so curious to find out. That was one of the most fascinating parts of the episode. We're like, okay, wait, they cured Tourette's?
Yeah, it's very upsetting, but it's good. I give it my S. It's very, very good. It's so creepy.
Yeah, not since the Jinx has there been a documentary that's probably been as hyped and as interesting.
Well, what was the Jinx? And by the way, I haven't heard that much about The Vow, so I don't know that it's being hyped.
I think it is. I've heard a lot. Maybe I'm just seeing on like people's Instagram stories and stuff, mainly like celebrities talking about it.
Okay.
But maybe it's because they've got more invested in kind of the celebrity aspect of it. The Jinx was the Robert Durst one.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember that at all?
I recognize that name.
He famously like had like 5 different wives and like changed his identity a bunch of times, and ends up being like he like hires this filmmaker to try to like make a movie of his life, and the filmmaker basically makes a like documentary. Like he doesn't really realize that the filmmaker is making a documentary about how this guy for sure killed his wives.
Oh, okay, yeah, I sort of remember that he was.
And like in the last episode, he's like mic'd up. This is like from like 6 years ago, so I'm not breaking news here. He's mic'd up and he goes into the bathroom. He's like, "Oh, they got me. I did it. Like, I can't believe it. I'm finally done. Like, I can't believe it." And so I think he's in prison now. Like, literally, the filmmaker did not call the police until like the day that the final episode was airing.
Oh, wow.
And he like went into jail that day.
Like, I got him. I do always wonder when I watch these shows, like, how do they have this much footage? Like, am I supposed to be filming more in my daily life in case I see something crazy? Like, even when, what's the main guy's name? Mike?
Oh,
doesn't matter. Mark. When Mark is explaining about like when he first met Keith, and he's like retelling this story about like being at Nancy's house, and then they just have footage of when Keith shows up at Nancy's house and he like takes off his jacket, and you're like,
yeah,
like it's found footage documentaries are fascinating to me.
Well, the big saving grace there is he was a filmmaker. And that's so right, I think I'm wondering if he was like the force behind this whole thing, because everything is filmed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's kind of how he indirectly got involved. He like had his movie in a festival, and he kind of followed the...
Yeah, you'd never heard of that movie before, had you? Like, What the Bleep?
Yeah, what the bleep is real or something? What the bleep is happening?
Yeah, and people like loved that movie for some reason.
It looks terrible. So I
not like it.
No. Anyway, it's really good.